Howdy, this is Lemmy of RevZilla TV, here to talk to you today about TC Brothers license plate mounts. You should be looking into a TC Brothers license plate bracket for your bike if you would like to follow the law in your country. These things are currently not really made for anything. It's a universal fit part. As far as putting it on your bike, it might be pretty simple, it might be pretty difficult. The level of work you're going to have to complete really depends on your bike and what you want to do with it. Installation, as such, really rings in at probably a 2 to 3 beard in our BSD, our beard scale of difficulty. Some of you may be cutting, welding, and re-powder coating / painting / chroming. Others of you may get away with a really light bolt-on install with some very simple wiring. Again, really does depend on what you're doing with it. Let's get right into things. So the TC Brothers have developed a system for mounting a tag to your bike, but the thing that makes them stand out is that this is a super modular system allowing a lot of different options. Now, there have been a billion places over the years that have devised some method of putting your tag on your bike, but TC Brothers has tried to systematically sort of address this and make it as universal as possible, and I think they've really hit it out of the park. So they offer their tag brackets either with or without taillights. You can see a couple options here. We've got a couple of 32 Ford repop taillights. We'll talk about those more in a little bit. Or if you're trying to cheap out, or maybe you have a taillight already in mind, you can get just the tag bracket solo. That is a possibility. So let's talk about how these things are constructed. You can see here this is super thick steel. It's powder coated really nicely. This is not a very exciting tag bracket in and of itself until I discuss the system with you. That's where things get really interesting. So you'll notice here these two holes here and these two holes here. What does that mean to you? It means you can mount your plate horizontally or you can mount your plate vertically depending on what you want to do, simply by switching the mount point for these. Now what they've done here is actually kind of ingenious. The mounting brackets have the exact same bolt pattern spacing as the U-bolt you can see over here, and they all will wind up working with the actual light mounts themselves. Now the light mounts are a little bit different. Up until now, this has been a standard license plate install. Everything we've talked about, you can find in other brands. The one thing you're not going to find somewhere else is back here. This is rubber grommet. This rubber grommet is isolating this taillight from the rest of this thing. TC Brothers calls this system their hardtail proof system. And those of you who have ever run a rigid bike understand that you're probably replacing bulbs a lot more often than most people. What these rubber cushions do is isolates the light from the rest of the motorcycle, so the delicate filaments inside of your taillight don't get the snot beaten out of them every time you hit a bump. What I love about this system is it allows a nice rigid mounting for the tag bracket itself, but the taillight is allowed to sort of float. It doesn't wind up being affected by all of those loud pipes and rigid mount motors that all you chopper guys are running. So a couple other things to talk about with respect to this thing. As far as mounting it to your bike, we talked about this being maybe easy or maybe difficult. Now I expect some guys using this particular setup to be building a chopper. You're starting from scratch on a bare frame, but there's plenty of other guys who are going to be just tidying up the tail of their bike on an existing motorcycle. This is where this gets kind of cool. So you'll notice these brackets we have setting here. This bracket is for mounting to a shock. This will allow you to put this plate onto the shock bolt of your motorcycle. You've got another mount plate over here. This will allow axle mounting. If you want to come actually off of your axle, this plate will let you do it. Again, these both bolt right up to the tag bracket itself. The other piece they're going to include too, you can actually see attached to this particular tag bracket. They'll include for you a slug that's already pre-coped, you can see there, so it'll fit nicely onto 1 1/8 tube. And it also includes a U-bolt. Now using their slug and U-bolt method is perfectly solid, especially if you do a good job welding this thing to your frame. However, it's probably not the prettiest option out there. My guess is that if you're handy enough to fab and weld a little bit, you might be able to come up with something a little bit more beautiful. But if you're not particularly interested in making everything look just so and you want a really solid mounting, this slug that they provide you is going to do a great job. Now onto the taillights. I said you can get these things with or without the taillights. You can see here we have a couple of 32 Ford repop taillights up here, and these things really are nicely made. They're not some cheapo knockoff. They really do look very nice. Stainless bodies on these puppies, and these are, again, duo lamp repops. These aren't just some knockoff. You think about all the details on this, really right down to the wire. Look at that nice cloth covered wire with very nice bullet connectors on there as well. One of the other things I'm going to give them style points on for, genuine glass lenses. I think that's super neat. These things look great and they really are crafted nicely. When you go with this system, you've got effectively a very nice taillight that's now completely isolated from the vibration that your chopper is sure to spit at it, and you have the freedom to sort of re-engineer or remount this thing as you see fit. Now when it comes to installation, I mentioned this really could span the gamut anywhere from 2 to 3 beards. If you have something easy where you're just going to go to a shock mount, say on a Sportster, or perhaps you have a little extra room on your axle and you can throw the axle mount version on this, it's all just nuts and bolts. Everything's already pre-finished. All you have to do is just rewire your taillight. Should be very simple for most of you to relocate that thing. I'm going to call that a 2-bearder. Those of you who are building something from scratch, maybe you want to do something custom or you want to weld this mount right to your frame, well, again, you're going to have to weld, and you're going to wind up either painting, powdering, or perhaps chroming your frame when you're all done, so that's going to bump that into the 3-beard category. But again, if you've been building choppers, you probably expect that. I really like this stuff. As far as I know, TC Brothers are the only people on the market right now who are supplying you with an isolated, hardtail-proof system to keep your taillight from blowing bulbs. If there's any others out there, I haven't seen them just yet. I think these things are super cool, but my opinion is not the only game in town. Click below. Check out what some riders who are already rocking a TC Brothers hardtail-proof license plate tag bracket on their bike think about it. If you have a question that I haven't gotten to, get in touch with one of our gear geeks. See us at RevZilla.com, or you can always get us on the horn. 877-792-9455. I'm Lemmy. I'm out of here.